If I say I will not mention his word or speak anymore in his name, his word is in my heart like a fire shut up in my bones. I am weary of holding it in. Indeed, I cannot. There are causes, issues, people who burn inside us, who set our hearts on fire. And everybody around us knows what those problems or who those people are, because we can't shut up about them. Have you ever met a brand new grandparent? Before you've gotten the O out in hello, they've got their cell phone out showing you the latest pictures of their grandbaby, who is the most beautiful baby the world has ever seen. Even more beautiful and more perfect than the baby's parents, who they previously thought were the most beautiful and perfect beings ever created. Or have you met someone who's selling a product that's new to them? Like, even when they're not trying to sell you, they're selling you. They can't help it. This product has changed their lives, and they want everybody to experience that. We've all been around this person, right? It's the guy we avoid at the ball game, the woman we avoid in the grocery store. My brother-in-law is a professor, the research kind, not the teaching kind, for Virginia Tech. Every conversation with him will at some point turn to cotton. That's his priority. That's his field. I have never bought cotton fertilizer. I'm never going to be in the market for cotton fertilizer, but he's still going to sell me on it. Why? Because it's a fire shut up in his bones. He can't not talk about it. That's what this new series, Fire in My Bones, is about. What is the thing that burns inside us? Not babies or products or acid reflux, but words of God that we just can't hold in any longer. We're going to hear each of our teaching pastors answer that question. And I'm looking forward to hearing what they have to say, because I'm curious. But more than that, I'm grateful for the help in narrowing it down, all the words, all the teachings, to just a few. Because I don't know about you, but I thought our culture was on information overload before. But now, it's a lot. There are so many ideas and words and opinions and images and decisions. It is utterly overwhelming. Many of us want to explore our spiritual questions, but it is hard to know where to start. And somewhere along the way, somebody maybe told us to read the Bible, but let's be honest. Picking up this book is intimidating. Figuring out where to start, and life is overwhelming. So we need just a few cornerstones from this to hold on to wrap our heads around, to help us find our bearings. This series will help us do that. Whether today is your first time at church or if you've been following Jesus for years. So, clearly I'm up first, and the thing that burns inside me is the importance of showing up. It's something I learned from Jesus himself, because he showed up in our world. And we all know this is a big deal. We celebrate it every year in a religious festival you may have heard of called Christmas. Now, we go all out to celebrate that, because God's coming to earth changed everything. It is a pivotal moment in history. It's an event that changed reality then, that has the potential to change our realities now and our eternities forever. See, Jesus showing up here isn't just about a baby in a manger thousands of years ago. It's an example for how we can live in our world right now. Now, of course, we're not Jesus. Our showing up in the world will not come with an angelic choir or shining light. It won't be celebrated with gifts and cookies and decorated trees. Our showing up in people's worlds looks more like sitting in silence than singing Silent Night. Instead of following a bright star in the sky, we show up in the darkest moments of people's lives. We show up in private struggles where there's grief instead of gifts, cries instead of cookies, depression instead of decorations. Now, we can't change people's eternities by showing up. We can give them a glimpse of the God who can. We can't change their realities, but we can remind them that they don't have to go through them alone, not now, not ever. Showing up to other people is the fire in my bones that I can't hold in. But of course, not everyone feels that way. It's okay. It's expected. And we can't agree on anything right now, can we? See, on one hand, we discredit showing up when we make fun of teachers who give credit to students just for showing up. We laugh about kids from the 80s and 90s, like me, who got trophies just for showing up and participating. On the other hand, we also advocate showing up. Woody Allen notably said 80% of success is showing up. The world-famous theoretical physicist Stephen Hawking said half the battle is just showing up. These men from different generations and fields agree that showing up is important. We can discuss whether it's more of a 50 or 80% impact, or maybe it's even more than that. Professor and speaker Brené Brown says sometimes the bravest and most important thing you can do is just show up. I tend to agree with her, not because she said it, but because Jesus lived it. See, Jesus modeled for us that showing up is courageous. Jesus did an incredibly brave thing that was most important for all of humanity when he showed up in our world. John 1:14 says, "The Word became flesh and made his dwelling among us." What's that mean? The Word, that's just another name for Jesus. And he became flesh like us. I mean, flesh, it breaks and bruises. It's fragile. Jesus, having all the strength and power of God, chose to make himself fragile, susceptible to bodily harm and pain. He chose to live among us. If you haven't noticed, we're not always so good to each other down here on earth. Jesus subjected himself to all the pain that comes with a human body and human community. Elsewhere in the Bible, it's described that Jesus made himself nothing by taking the very nature of a servant, being made in human likeness. Jesus voluntarily gave up his position in heaven to come here as a human. Now, make no mistake about it. His coming here wasn't all Christmas carols and candlelight. It was costly. He was humiliated, rejected, misunderstood. He went to places where he wasn't welcome, to people he wasn't like. He became nothing and was executed like a nobody. To a much lesser degree, this reminds me of Russell Crowe, Robin Hood, the gladiator, a boxer, an outlaw, a captain, a mathematical genius with schizophrenia. He has had the guts to take on the British monarchy, the Roman Empire, the Wild West, an angry ocean, the demons in his own head. But his most courageous moment of all might not have been standing up to Commodus in the Colosseum. It may have been stepping onto the Oscar stage in 2013 with the cast of Les Mis. See, that movie had been acclaimed, but Crowe's singing in it was annihilated for months leading up to that award show. And yet he found the courage to show up and to sing on the stage in front of his critics. He was humiliated, rejected. He went where he wasn't welcome because showing up is courageous. Now, thank goodness we don't all have to show our courage by singing on stage, because I would absolutely fail that test. I'm never singing up here. But showing up demands courage from us. It takes guts to give up our time, our comfort, our pride. See, often when someone we care about is struggling, we stay away. We're uncomfortable. We don't like hospitals or nursing homes or funeral homes. We do like fixing things. When we're faced with something that can't be fixed or explained or understood, we don't know what to do. Unfortunately, a whole lot of our lives falls into those categories. We can't fix cancer. We can't explain why some people easily have healthy babies and others don't. We can't understand why accidents and disasters happen. Nobody here is going to fix our economy or politics or explain this disease, why it's devastating for some and not for others. We can't really understand what it's like to have a different color skin than the one we're born with. And whether someone is struggling with an intimate, private one or a big public one, we don't show up. We know we can't fix it. We're mortified that we might say the wrong thing, so we stay away. But Jesus showed us another way. He showed us that He tackled the biggest problem our world has ever seen, the separation of God and man, by showing up in the most intimate, private way, childbirth. He shows us that we tackle the big problems in our world with our friends and our families, that we do that by finding the courage to show up in close, personal ways. But before we get to what that actually looks like, let's be honest. Even if we have courage, we can't show up for all the problems and all the people all the time. We can't sit with the woman who's fighting cancer and the man who's been laid off and the teenager who's depressed and the kid who's angry. We can't tackle all the problems facing our world. COVID and quarantine, valuing all races and good law enforcement and education and the environment. It's impossible, no matter how courageous you are. And that's true. That's why another principle that we learn from Jesus is that showing up is conditional. What I mean by that is that under some circumstances, in some conditions, we need to show up or not. We have to determine what those conditions are. Even Jesus, when he came to earth as a human, couldn't be everywhere with everyone every moment. Yes, he showed up for all of humanity when he came to earth as a human, but he decided to enter our world at a certain place, Israel, at a certain time to a certain people, the Jews. Why didn't he show up in Russia or India or Brazil or America? I don't know. Why didn't he show up earlier or later or to a different race? We could debate all of those questions, but at the end of the day, Jesus made choices about when, where, and to whom to show up, and we have to too. So let's look a little closer at some of Jesus' choices about his conditions to see what we can learn from them. Now, first, as I said, Jesus shows up for all mankind because nothing matters to Jesus more than people. I mean, he was with God when the whole world was created, but amongst the planets and the Pacific, amongst penguins and palm trees, we're his priority. People. People matter to Jesus. That's why he showed up. And of course, we're not him. I'm not quite sure it's fair to say any of us shows up for all of mankind. But we do have a responsibility to conduct ourselves in front of all people in a way that reflects Jesus to everybody that we're around. And now, while Jesus came for all people, he was clear about whom he really showed up for. Jesus said, "It is not the healthy who need a doctor, but the sick. I have not come to call the righteous, but sinners." Jesus didn't show up for the righteous people, the healthy ones. He showed up for the sinners and the sick. We don't use the language sinners much. We all know what it means to be sick. But the point is that Jesus intentionally decided to invest his energy and his efforts with the people who needed him most. This is a condition we should set for ourselves too. I mean, yes, we're all sinners. We all get sick. But let's admit, it's easier to be with people who are doing well, who've got some things figured out. Showing up for people who are sick and struggling, it takes effort, more time, energy, patience, heart. And I confess, I've gotten this wrong a lot. For every time I could tell you I've gotten it right, I could name at least 2 times I've gotten it wrong. But the few times I have gotten it right, God has placed me with people in hard, heartbreaking moments that have formed me into a better person. For a long time now, a woman I dearly love, has struggled with mental illness. When she gets hospitalized, she often reaches out to me, and if she does, I show up. It's rarely convenient, with limited visiting hours. At times, I confess it's been uncomfortable interacting with some of the other patients. There's absolutely nothing I can do to fix the imbalance in her brain or the damage it causes in her life. But I can show up. And I can remind her that Jesus loves her and he shows up for people just like her. There's another woman I've loved for years who has struggled with addiction. Once she was in the hospital and there were complications because of her past. I stayed by her bed all night long because she asked me to. I held her hand when she was in pain. I reminded her that she was strong and brave. In the morning, I went for some coffee, some fresh air. Some nurses stopped me in the hallway and said, "Oh, you're being so good to her." It was a compliment for me, but I'm a Southern girl. I recognize a "bless her heart" comment when I hear one. And it made me angry. See, we don't just show up for people who are sick but righteous. We show up for people who are sick and sinners too, because Jesus showed up for people just like her. And at times, he narrowed his conditions even more. While he showed up for the sick, he showed up most often to his closest followers, his disciples. Jesus hand-selected, personally invited a dozen men to follow him. They traveled, they ate, they did life together. We also get to hand-select, personally invite a small group of people to do life with us. Now, granted, we don't ask them to follow us like Jesus did. That would be kind of weird. But we do identify the people that we're going to get real with. And we show up for those people. I have a few circles of disciples in my life. One of them is my small group. Recently, a couple in my small group thanked me for always showing up with soup when there's sickness or a minivan when childcare is needed, with prayers, hugs, tears when there's death and crisis. Now, would I love to do that for everybody? Yes, I really would. But can I? No. These people, they're in my small group. We are disciples, followers of Jesus together. I can show up for them. Another of these smaller circles of disciples are the people I work most closely with. Recently, I was visiting a couple of them in the emergency room again. The husband teared up. When I walked in, he said, "You always show up." Now, granted, he was probably emotional that time because I showed up with Chick-fil-A. I don't always show up with waffle fries and the good ice. But with people in that circle, when there's a kid in the hospital, there's a problem with a pregnancy, when there's a disagreement over a divisive topic, I try to show up. Now again, would I love to do that for all of my coworkers? Yes. Can I? No. But these folks were disciples, doing the work of Jesus together day in and day out. I can show up for them. Find your group of fellow disciples that you can get real with in small group, that you can make a difference with on the dream team. And then don't just show up for a weekly meeting or a weekly job with them. Show up in each other's lives. And show up for one more group. See, Jesus had a dozen disciples, but within that group, he had his closest 3. The Bible tells us that one time, Jesus took Peter, John, and James with him and went up onto a mountain to pray. As he was praying, the appearance of his face changed, and his clothes became as bright as a flash of lightning. Jesus took just 3 of the disciples with him for this deeply personal experience when he would be exposed for who he really was. The 3 got to see who Jesus was in a way the other disciples didn't. If Jesus showed up as he really was to just 3 of his closest friends, then we need to be able to do that too. Even within our small groups and teams, there are probably just a few people with whom you can share who you truly are. Now, it takes time and a lot of trust to identify those people. Jesus had vested a lot with his disciples before he pulled these 3 aside and showed up as his true self. When we've invested the time and built the trust, then we can show up and show our most vulnerable selves to just a few people. Earlier this week, I was one of 3 women who went for a walk. On the surface, it looked like 3 coworkers exercising. If you'd asked us, we probably would have initially said that 2 of us were showing up for the 3rd. In reality, we showed up for each other. We walked and talked and were vulnerable and real for over an hour. But what nobody could have seen as we walked by was the years of conversations, of celebrations, of heartaches, of investing in each other's lives and families that got us there. That time and work is required, but it's so worth it when you can show up as your true self, sick and healthy, sinful and righteous to others. You can't do that with every person on the planet, not even every person you like. You have to make choices like Jesus did, because showing up is conditional. But the reason we define the conditions, the reason we find the courage, is because showing up shows Jesus. It is amazing and humbling and life-changing and eternity-altering that Jesus showed up on earth. But that was a long time ago, on the other side of the planet, to a different group of people. And right now, in 2020, in Powhatan and Midlothian, Amelia and Aylett, Buckingham, Fluvanna, Farmville, Nottoway, there are all sorts of people who need to see Jesus. Jesus isn't showing up to them as a baby in a manger or a preacher or a healer. He's showing up to them through you. When you show up in someone's broken, messy, painful life, like Jesus showed up in our broken, messy, painful world, you give them a glimpse of Jesus himself. You show them all the things that Jesus has shown you, that they are never alone, that they are loved, that they are worth showing up for. Not even though they're sick and screwed up, but precisely because they're sick and screwed up. 2020 has been a heck of a year so far. And it's easy to sit back and say, we need more Jesus in this world, to wish Jesus would show up in some big miraculous way. But what 2020 really needs is us, is you and me to do the hard work, to find the courage, to define the conditions, and then to actually show up and show the world a glimpse of Jesus. This is a fire in my bones that I can't keep in, because when I look at you, when I think of the people at all of our campuses, the people on the beach and at the lake who are joining us behind computer and phone screens, I think about how every single one of you was worth it for Jesus to show up. You were worth it for the Son of God to leave heaven and come here. He knows how hard life is here, because he came here and was hurt, rejected, humiliated. He knew how painful it was going to be, and he still chose to show up because you're that valuable. You're that important. And so is everybody around you. Of course, you and I aren't Jesus, but we can follow his example. We can show up in this broken world for the sick and the sinners, for the people who let us get real and expose who we really are. We have to show up for them. There are people God wants to show up for, and he's counting on showing up through you. The most famous verse in the Bible tells us that Jesus showed up because God so loved the world. Showing up shows a Jesus who loves the world. When you enter someone's craziness, When they can't keep up, you don't have to have the answers. You won't have the answers, but you can show up and show them what love looks like. As we move into our last song, I hope you'll begin to consider who God wants to show up for through you. We hope you'll be inspired and encouraged by seeing how people around us have shown up for each other in just the right ways at just the right times.
I used to think I wanted to be famous, that I'd be recognized out in a crowd. But the funny thing is, every time I've gotten what I want, it lets me down. Now I just want to look more like love. I just want to look more like love. This whole world is spinning crazy, and I just can't keep up. It's the one thing around here that we don't have quite enough of, so I just want to look a little more like love. I used to think I needed all the answers. I used to think I needed to be right. I used to be afraid of things I couldn't cover up in black or white. Now I just want to look more like love. I just want to look more like love. This whole world is spinning crazy, and I just can't keep up. It's the one thing around here that we don't have quite enough of, so I just want to look a little more like love. I find further that I climb, there's always another line of mountaintop. It's never gonna stop. The more of anything I do, the thing that always ends up true is getting what I want will never be enough. So now I just want to look more like love. I just want to look more like love. This whole world is spinning crazy, and I just can't keep up. It's the one thing around here that we don't have quite enough of, so I just want to look a little more like love, like love, like love.
Somebody out there is struggling. And what they want, they might not even know it, they certainly don't know how to ask for it, is for somebody to show up. I believe God wants to show up for that person. I believe He wants to use us to do it. So this week, I hope that you will pray for God to show you when and where and to whom to show up. I hope he'll give you eyes to see and ears to hear those great opportunities that he's going to put before you. Do the hard work. Find the courage. Define the conditions, and then show people a glimpse of Jesus. That's what our world really needs. Thank you for being here today. I hope you'll come back next week as we continue the Fire in My Bones series. Take care.